I'm Carlotta Castelluccio, Cloud Advocate at Microsoft, Academic Cloud Advocate. I'm based in Italy, and I advocate for machine learning technologies and artificial intelligence technologies. And in terms of people, I advocate for students and educators. So today I wish to present you some great GitHub tools available for free for teachers, which are GitHub Codespaces and GitHub Copilot. Please feel free to ask questions during the presentation. So before digging into the details of what these tools are and how you can get the most out of them, let me just tell you that in roughly 2 weeks, on 9th and 10th of November, it will take place one of the biggest GitHub event of the year, which is GitHub Universe. And you can join the virtual event for free and discover the latest announcements about GitHub products and features. So if you want to learn more, just visit githubuniverse.com page. Great. So the best way to introduce GitHub Codespaces and Copilot, I think, is showing you how they work in practice. And that's why I prepared for today's session 2 use case scenarios in which those tools can be very helpful. And then I go directly to a demo. So let's start with Codespaces and with the story of a teacher, in particular a data science teacher, whose name is Ali. So Ali is a data science teacher at the University of Nowhere, and she's preparing for her spring semester course. And in particular, she's preparing a guided tutorial with a full list of all the instructions her student will need to set up the environment for her first Python lab. And she's feeling frustrated about how long this prerequisites list is and how much time her students will take to only open and execute the first Python notebook. It's very likely that her students will take 30 minutes to 1 hour before having their machines ready to kick off. Also, she is concerned about creating disparities between students that cannot afford high-performance machines. And in particular, going forward with the growing complexity of the assignments she will propose to her students, it's very likely that some students will challenge serious difficulties in managing high-volume datasets or more complex machine learning algorithms training on their local environments. Also, if she would need to tune, for example, and add some more configurations to the environment during the course of the semester, the amount of rework to share the new instruction to the students and ensure that everyone is on the right page is significant. So at this point, you might be wondering, so how GitHub Codespaces can help this teacher, can help Ali with all those questions and concerns. So let me cover these. A Codespace is a development environment that's hosted in the cloud and is accessible via your browser, with a familiar interface similar to Visual Studio Code. And Ali can customize her project for GitHub Codespaces by using dev containers and committing configuration files to her repository, which creates a repeatable Codespace configuration for all users of her project, in this case, all her students. So the results of using Codespaces for Ali is that students will have a ready-to-go environment with almost 0 time setup, and all the pre-processing steps to configure an environment will be transparent to them. GitHub Codespaces run on a variety of virtual machine-based compute options hosted by github.com in a range from 2 core machines to up to 32 core machines. So Ali can guarantee to her students a similar user experience to everyone running the same project. And using dev containers and config files, Ali can also create a repeatable Codespace configuration that she can share with students of different courses, for example, or even outside of her course when she speaks at a conference. So all of these may sound interesting, but may be a bit confusing if you don't see it in action. So let me go directly to GitHub, because first of all, to access GitHub Codespaces from an enabled GitHub account, the teacher of our story should create a GitHub repository where to store the code of her lab or assignment. And let's imagine that the first lab of this data science course includes only one simple Python notebook like this. So now to open this notebook and execute it on a Codespace, I just need to click on this green button here and then click on the plus button to create a new Codespaces. While if I click on the menu blade and I click on Manage Codespaces, I can also see existing Codespaces already active and running. And also I can configure a Codespace before creating one. For example, I can configure the branch from which I start the Codespace. I can configure the dev container configuration, the region, or the machine type. But optimize time, since I have already an active Codespaces, let me open this. So as it opens, you see that the layout is very similar to Visual Studio Code. And here I have my example notebook Python opened. And you have also the menu here, similar to Visual Studio Code, with the menu blade with the files, the source control, debug option, etc., and all the files in your project. But since it is a notebook, of course, you can also add code and markdown cells with one click. But let me start from executing this notebook. So these simple notebooks import some packages like pandas, import the data set, which are a wine data set, and then also plot the data using matplotlib. So how is it possible that I'm using Python 3.8, I'm using pandas, I'm using matplotlib with no configuration steps? What's the trick? So the trick is in the config files I mentioned before. First of all, the dev container.json, where you can specify, in this example for a Python lab, you can specify the Python version. You can also specify the settings and the extension, the Visual Studio Code settings and extensions. And the Docker file, where you can specify the requirements to install when building the container. In our example, all the list of requirements is listed in the requirement.txt file. So here you can see that I have all the packages I want to use in my container in my lab, which is ipykernel, pandas, and matplotlib. So here's why I can run this notebook with no other configuration steps. And of course, this is not written in the stone. All of this is customizable. For example, if you want to specify a different Python version or add some Python packages, you can easily modify the config files and rebuild your containers in a few minutes. But now let me introduce another character of the story. Our new character is Mark. And Mark is a student at University of Nowhere, and he attended the data science lab by Prof. Ellie on GitHub Codespaces and Python, and now he needs to complete the assignment at home. However, at some point it gets stuck. So what can he do? He can, of course, search on the web. Most likely this will eventually help Mark complete his assignment, but without any guidance, this will probably take quite a lot of time. He can ask for help to a peer, for example, which attended the same lab. And this could be a good option if Mark has smart and kind friends. Or the third option could be waiting for the next lab and try to clarify his doubts to the professor or the teaching assistant, but this will probably imply that he will not submit the assignment in time. So Mark really looks like in need of a paid programmer. And actually, Copilot is an artificial intelligence empowered paid programmer that offers autocomplete style suggestions as you code in different languages, like Python, JavaScript, and C++. You can receive suggestions from GitHub Copilot either by starting writing the code you want to use or by writing a natural language comment describing what you want your code to do. It relies on the OpenAI Codex model, which is trained on billions of lines of GitHub open source code. And it's available as an extension in Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio, and Codespaces. And this means that Mark can receive the support he needs without even leaving his lab environment. And let's see how. Let's come back for a moment in our Codespace and to our notebook. And let's imagine that in this assignment, Mark needs to filter the dataset to obtain, since this is a wines dataset, to obtain, for example, only the wines coming from a region located in France. And since Mark is new to Python, he doesn't really know how to do that. So first of all, he needs to ensure that he has two packages installed, two extensions, installed, which are GitHub Copilot and GitHub Copilot Labs. GitHub Copilot suggests you as you code as you are coding, while GitHub Copilot Labs explain code written by someone else, for example. And we will see how. So coming back to our notebook, let's imagine that Mark should filter this dataset. So what he can do is start writing a comment. As you can see, as I write, GitHub Copilot is already suggesting me a comment. But it's not my case, so I will continue typing. And my assignment is filtering dataset to extract only, we said, wines whose region name contains France. So this is my assignment. If I click on enter, here I have a suggestion from Copilot. So what it is suggesting me is to the syntax of how you can do a string contains in Python, and then filter the column from the dataset, and then also printing the first few rows. And let's see the results. So the code is correct in the sense that it executed correctly, and it also gave me what I wished. So the list of the first few rows of the list of wines from the France region. But let's do another example, a slightly complex one, a more complex one. For example, I want another question of the assignment could be plotting the distribution of wine ratings, because the wine dataset also contains ratings, as an histogram, for example. And here's what GitHub Copilot is suggesting me. Let's try to execute this code. This code will not work because I don't have a points column in my dataset. And what I want to do is the distribution of wine ratings. But still, I have a good suggestion about the syntax to use. So if Mark knows that he wants the distribution of wine ratings, it just needs to correct the suggestion and adapt the suggestion to his needs. Sorry, it's rating without an S. And here's the histogram plot he wished to create in his assignment. The last thing I want to show you, let's imagine now that Mark doesn't understand a piece of code of this notebook written by the professor, for example, the first code chunk. So this time he needs an explanation of a code written by his professor, right? So here's where it comes the other Copilot extension, which is called Copilot Labs extension. So if I click here and I open the GitHub Copilot Labs tabs, and then I highlight the code chunk I want to get explanation of, I can just ask Copilot with this button and obtain an explanation of this code chunk. So import pandas to import the library, then read the CSV file, and then show the first 20 rows. So exactly what Mark or a beginner learners of Python wish to have to understand code written by anyone else. And another feature is also language translation. So if you need to translate the code in another language, you can also choose a language supported in the list and ask Copilot to do the language translation. So this is all for my demo. Before wrapping up, I would like to give you a disclaimer. So Copilot code, of course, is not perfect. Like any other code suggested by a Copilot should be tested, should be reviewed and vetted. You've seen also in my demo, one of the suggestions should be adopted to what I really wish to do. And of course, the developer is in charge of the code he writes, even if some of the code is suggested by Copilot, pasted from a forum, or suggested by a peer. So now let me wrap up with some steps you can do if you are interested to start using GitHub Codespaces and Copilot. So first of all, you should join the Global Campus program, the GitHub Global Campus program, using this aka.ms link, and verify yourself as a teacher. Once you are in this Global Campus program, you can access Codespace and customize your dev environment. If you are interested, if you want, you can start from the template I showed you today, that you can find at aka.ms Python Codespaces for teachers. And then I encourage you to install Copilot extension on Visual Studio Code, on Visual Studio, or on Codespaces, and start getting code suggestions and code explanations.